We're again in a very special program at Arabic Hour with very special person from a special family. Miss Nadia Stumo, but from the Nader family. Her mother is a distinguished academician, anthropologist at the University of California, Berkeley. Her uncle is no less than our hero, Ralph Nader, and a very well accomplished person by herself. She's a lawyer, graduated from the University of Iowa Law School in 1994, and she has devoted a considerable amount of her time active in advocating for safety, travel safety. She has lost a daughter in one of these Boeing MAX planes that were put into service without proper safeguards. And she has been able, with her husband, to Mr. Michael Stomo, to pass the Aviation Safety Act in December 2020. The law passed ultimately 2023 and was signed by the Illinois governor last August. She also lobbied for other issues, especially the use of electric shocks, dealing with people as a instrument of control of behavior, totally unacceptable, and she was successful too in making sure that this practice is not acceptable and not condoned and outlawed. There is now a great chance that with your support, that Nadia could be our representative. She's running as an independent for the U.S. Congress in the district, Massachusetts one. And we look very forward to have her voice, because it's a voice for justice and for our community and standing for our rights. That sometimes we wonder to what extent have they been protected and have been implemented. And we're here to talk about what Nadia's plans are. Why did she choose to run? And what she expects if she was successful, what would she be doing? Nadia, please take us through the decision that you have made. This is not unusual from the family. You've been always in the limelight, protecting consumers and people for safety. So please, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Professor. I really appreciate your introduction and the time that you're spending with me here. I'm very also appreciative of the relationship you have with my mother, and she remembers you and your trip to Syria together many years ago. So our families go back a long way. But for me, even though for my family, being in the public eye is normal, but for me it is unusual. So only in the last 5 years since my daughter's death on the Boeing MAX airplane have I been a public person. So I never was interested in politics. I thought that politics were by their nature corrupt. And then after my daughter's death, which was due to corruption between the FAA and Boeing, I realized that things don't stay static. They don't stay kind of at an awful level. If you don't stand up, they actually get worse. And so what happened was they wanted to put this defective plane back into service. And we understood that if we didn't go to Washington and lobby the congressional offices and go to hundreds of offices and expose ourselves personally and share our grief and use our grief to warn people that they could also die on a defective plane. If we did not do that, then there would be a third crash. And we have sort of staved that off, bringing attention to the issue, increasing aviation safety, but the issue is not sort of resolved. There still is a risk on these planes. Nobody should fly on a MAX plane. You should definitely look at the equipment that you select when you select your flight. and choose. Now you can look at the equipment. Now you have that ability. Before our work, you couldn't even tell before you booked a plane what type of plane you would be flying on. You would have to book your flight and then see the equipment and then go back and change. But now through many like kayak and other travel services, you can actually choose what type of equipment you want to fly on. So in that regard, I just say to all the people out there, choose Airbus, because in Europe, engineers have to certify their work. They are responsible for their work. They have to sign off on their work. And in the United States, in car manufacturing and also aviation manufacturing, it's a group sign off, and you don't actually have certified engineers. So my son is a ship's engineer. He works in the boiler room of big ships, and he has to sign off on all of his work. If he signs off and he made a mistake, he'll lose his license as an engineer. And that's the way it should be. People should have skin in the game, and they should have accountability. But in the United States, in those two industries, which are critical industries, transportation industries, right? Aviation and car manufacturing, they don't have certified engineers, and they have a group sign off. So for that reason, Airbus is safer just because it's a European company. And so they have different accountability. So we are still fighting to make Boeing accountable. We are going to Fort Worth, Texas. There is a criminal case against Boeing from the DOJ. They want to make a plea deal with Boeing. They want to let them off and never mention that their fraud killed 346 people on 2 different plane loads. So we want to ask the judge not to approve that plea deal, and instead to have a hearing, a trial and sentencing. And when you have sentencing, so Boeing already admitted to these charges, so the trial would be very short. But in the sentencing part of the process, you talk about what the perpetrator is doing right now. What is the accused doing to risk the public today? And we already have 4 emergency incidents in July. We have more for June. We have more documented for May. So the perpetrator, Boeing, is continuing to risk human life, and that should be dealt with by the court. We can't just let this killer company continue to risk life. And if they continue on with the same behavior and they are not checked, then we will have a third crash. So we could see that by the Alaska blowout. That could have been a whole plane load gone down. And you can't blame the side of the plane going out on the pilots, which is what Boeing and airlines like to do after there's some kind of crash or incident. They like to blame the pilots. But in this case, these are new planes, defective new planes. And so some of them are only a couple months old. The one that my daughter died on was only a couple months old when she died. And there was a Dutch roll that occurred on the plane that my daughter died on. There was that Dutch roll in December. She died in March. So in a brand new plane delivered to Ethiopia, there was a Dutch roll. Ethiopian Airlines contacted Boeing and said, what's going on with this? They said there's an electrical short. But what they didn't tell Ethiopian Airlines is that the electrical short was under the boards of the plane, under the passenger area. And so you'd have to rip all that up in order to fix it. And it was a manufacturing defect. So, you know, we just can't ignore this stuff. You can't just say, oh, see no evil, hear no evil. You know, these are real risks that we actually have to deal with and engage in. So, as you said, I went to Washington. I was part of the effort to pass the Aviation Safety Act in December of 2020. But then there was a separate legislation that happened in Illinois. So after that, I went to Illinois and helped to pass legislation to keep corporations, including Boeing, who was at the time based in Chicago, keep them accountable. So that was punitive damages for wrongful death. That did not exist in Illinois. It existed in 38 of our states in the United States, but it didn't exist in Illinois. So it took 2 legislative sessions to pass that in Illinois. And then, as you said, Governor Pritzker of Illinois passed that state legislation. He signed it into law last August. So kind of a birthday present for me. And by doing the efforts in Washington, D.C. and also in Illinois, I learned that I have the ability to help pass bipartisan legislation. And so I looked at my district, my congressional district, and I know that my Congressman, Richard Neal, has not helped us with the aviation safety legislation. He did sign it into law, but he didn't help us in getting it passed. And it was a huge effort, right? And so I saw that he doesn't help a lot of other people. And there's a lot of issues in our district and a lot of suffering here. He signs on to sending a lot of money to Ukraine and to Israel to kill human beings, and billions of dollars he agrees with. He's funded by AIPAC. And this actually directly threatens the well-being of human beings who live here, because we don't have enough doctors. We don't have enough affordable housing. We have crazy prices in the grocery store that are due to greed, and he's not signing on to that legislation. You know, so yeah, I guess I'm talking, but
no,
yeah.
no, that's very good. And one thing we know about Mr. O'Neill is that he is one of the largest person with donors, with corporate donors. So his record is consistent with those who fund his campaign. So you are challenging him on the premise that he is not serving the people who would elect him, and he is more really in tune and far more committed to promote business and donors' interests rather than people on Main Street and people who are suffering from these incredible crimes, I would call them, when they are negligent and they know that their planes are not safe and yet they continue. But you mentioned something that is very close to what we in the Arabic Hour really interested. I mean, we watched the Congress and not talk about the largest picture, bringing a person who is literally charged with infractions of the international humanitarian law and international law, and accused of being a perpetrator of genocide and mass murder. And yet, in 50 minutes that he spoke, he got 51 standing ovations. To a great extent, many of us who watch what we consider the citadel of democracy being completely complicit and turning a blind eye to this person from Israel who is accused by the highest court, the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court, and has a warrant for his arrest. And yet the United States, that prides itself on making sure that we live by a rules-based way of life, and it's basically turning a blind eye, if not supporting this. So are you, when you gonna be running, and hopefully you will be in Congress, and we need you there, is there any plan that you would be challenging some of these trespasses that we have seen that have really made a mockery of American democracy?
So,
am I being exaggerating here?
No, you're absolutely correct. So my whole life being in an Arab American family, I have stood up for Palestine my whole life. In fact, before I decided to run in October of 2023, right? October 16th, I stood in front of the White House, blocking the doors of the White House with If Not Now, which is a Jewish organization. I actually demonstrated with 10,000 Arab Americans, 10,000 people on Saturday, October 14th. right in front of the White House. And it was a peaceful demonstration where we didn't do any civil disobedience. And then I had to go to the airport. Just to let you know how many people is 10,000 people. I had to wait 20 minutes in the garage for all those 10,000 people to pass in front of my car before I could get out of the garage to go to the airport. And there was no press about that. No press at all. So it's just very disturbing that the government doesn't listen to the people standing up. So my sons and I were upset about this, and we were trying to think, what could we do next? And on that Monday, which was the 16th,
5.5 hours.
yeah, the Monday, which was the 16th, we went and joined this demonstration. And as a result of that, my son and I were arrested, and we were incarcerated in Washington, D.C. for 36 hours. And we got 14 major press outlets. So 36 people being arrested and incarcerated got 14 major press outlets when 10,000 human beings demonstrating in the same spot but not breaking the law got 0 press outlets. So it was important to, Biden wasn't able to continue on with his afternoon. People were stuck inside the White House. They weren't able to leave. We blocked the doors for 6 hours. And so we brought it to the attention of the president. We brought it to the attention of the public. And it is a shame. I've never been arrested before in my life, but it is a shame that we have to go to those lengths in order to call attention to the issues. But I'm willing to go to those lengths because human beings are dying. Innocent human beings are dying with our tax dollars. And Boeing is sending bombs and bombing people that are in tents in Rafah, innocent people. You can totally see who's living in a tent. There's no secret about who's there. Those people are not combatants. And so on June 17th of this year, I went to the Senate, and that morning my charges were dismissed. So I had to make a deal with the court that said I would not go to Washington anymore, which is ironic, right? Because I'm trying to apply for a job to work in Washington. But we do have an apartment there, and then my uncle Ralph Nader and his sister Claire Nader live there. And so the judge allowed me to go to the airport, National Airport. I could take the train to my apartment. I could take the train to their home, but I couldn't go anywhere else in DC. And what they were saying to me is, don't do any more protests. And those charges were lifted the morning of the 17th, which allowed me to go to the Senate hearing where David Calhoun, who's the CEO of Boeing, was testifying. And before his testimony, he came up to me and he said, I want you to know that I'm very sorry for your loss. And I said, oh, you're sorry? Are you also sorry about the bombs that killed innocent people in Rafah that you produced? Because I think people are not linking these issues. This company didn't just kill innocent passengers. They also actively kill innocent people. And then in May, there were no purchases of the MAX except for one country. Who purchased the MAX in May? Israel. So I pat your back, you pat my back, right? So it's all part of the same, same horrible system, which is oppressing human beings, killing human beings, not attending to the medical needs and housing needs and food needs of human beings in our district. So it is all linked. However, in this election, I have to stick, and also when I'm a member of Congress, I have to stick to the needs of our district. But it still supports all the same issues, because attending to the needs of our district and not making this about Israel or about Palestine, and talking about how we have to spend our tax dollars for the well-being of our citizens, it still works for the well-being of other people in the world, because then we're not sending money for bombs and to kill other people, but rather spending that money for what we need to do right here. And so that's what I would stand up for during the election, and also when I'm in Congress. Now I have to tell you some really exciting things. I actually have a chance to win this election, which is like a miracle, because this guy has been an incumbent for 34 years. And so usually, you wouldn't have a chance. But the fact is that I'm running as an independent. So usually the Democratic Party squishes anyone who goes against Neil. They smear them with like homophobic campaigns or whatever smears they can come up with. But I didn't go through the Democratic primary. I'm just going for the general election by being an independent. So we just did a recent poll, and when voters are given an initial matchup with me and Neil, it's 42% for Neil and 21% for me. So that's where we are right now. But when voters are given brief information about me, including my general background and my policy positions, by the end of the poll, they choose me 49% to Neil 23%. So what the data shows is we can get this done. And Neil is clearly vulnerable. You know, for a long time incumbent to come in an initial poll like that below 50% to an unknown opponent, it means that we really have a chance. Not only that, but there's no Republican running. So I'm just in an election with Richard Neal, who is very disliked by many people in his district. And it's just me and him on the ballot.
All right, so, good luck.
Yeah. So it's really kind of a miracle. And I understand what I have to do to communicate with 500,000 people. I have to have advertising on the television. So I've produced advertisements, and they're going to run through the first week of September. Those are already set, and they're going to go. But I need to raise 300,000 more in order to finish those advertisements all the way to November 5th. And then in addition to that, I have to raise another 100,000 for the cost of the campaign, like the salaries of the people that are working on the campaign. So if I raise 400,000, I can win the election. So I'm totally committed to that. And it's an incredible chance. Like in the next election, Neil is probably going to drop out, and Dominic Sarno, who's the mayor of Holyoke, is going to get the handoff. And that's exactly how Neil got in. 34 years ago, he was the mayor of Holyoke. He and the other guy started running in the election. The other guy dropped out, and then Neil took over the election. And they had everything printed in advance, right? It seemed like it was just going to be the other guy. I can't remember what his name was, but and then all of a sudden, but the printer knew, because the printer had all of this material ready for Neil's campaign, right? But the people didn't know. So they want to do the same handoff in 2 more years. And I want to interrupt this whole process and and get a decent person in there.
Yeah, power to you. Look, I mean, you also outlined here what our community and your supporters could do. I mean, this would be the cheapest price one can pay to be in the Congress. It's
that's right.
You know,
I know it sounds like a lot, 400,000, and I've already put in a lot of my own money into this race. I don't have any more money to put into the race, but actually 400,000 to go from now till the end of the race is incredibly cheap to communicate with 500,000 human beings, and it's such an auspicious situation. I mean, I can't believe there's not a Republican running. I can't believe I'm just in this race alone with Neil. I can't believe that he's polling so badly already. So all of these things are just it's just like a gift. It's a gift to us. And I did all the work. Here I am, the candidate. I filed with the Federal Elections Commission. I got myself on the ballot. I got all the signatures. So I'm giving this gift to the community.
Yes, and certainly is appreciated. And what you have also proven, that when the polling was being conducted, that when people knew about your policies and knew what you stood for, and they knew what you have actively sought and succeeded in getting, the polling percentage changed to totally your favor. So here is a chance. And there is enough evidence that if people were to support you and if they were to donate, the chances are very high that you will succeed. And we need this voice. How many voices do we have from our community and people who are really concerned about the plight of our undivided humanity and what's happening in Gaza and other places? There are very few. So to a great extent, you're providing us everywhere, the community, a chance to have a voice. And we need that voice. And we can get this voice for the cheapest price. What else are you advocating for?
So I really looked into what the main issues are in our district, and they are shared by other districts. But I think one thing I didn't mention that is also amazing, I think I forgot to mention it, is that it's a very unusual district in that we have 337,000 independent voters and only 148,000 registered Democrats and 50,000 registered Republicans. So there's no other district in the country that has more than double the number of independent voters as the next major party. So that means that, and already in the independent voters, I'm 11 points above Neil among that group in the independent voters. So that's another auspicious. So there's like so many stars aligning here. I just wanted to point that out. So, the top issue in our district is that we don't have enough doctors. So that's true all over the country, but it's especially bad here. So basically what that means is people have to get, if they have a urgent care that needs to be dealt with by their doctor, not the emergency room, they have to wait 4 to 6 months for an appointment because the doctors have too many patients. And then if you move into our district, let's say you have elderly parents and your parents want to move near you and they move into the district, they cannot get a doctor. They simply cannot get a doctor. All of the practices are full. Sometimes people, if they've moved from New York, they have to travel back to New York to be seen for medical care. So this is a huge issue. And it's under the purview of Richard Neal. So he is on the Ways and Means Committee, which is supposed to help with healthcare in our country and pass healthcare legislation. In the Senate, there is a bill pending, which is bipartisan bill, which helps with one of the blockages to having enough doctors. So we don't have enough residencies in our country right now. There was a freeze put on residencies, I think in 1994. And that was lifted 21 years later, but no remedy was made to increase the number of residencies. And so that's one of the problems, one of the blockages as to why nationwide there's a shortage. And then, of course, there's plenty of doctors in Boston. So we have to give incentives for medical students to come into our district, and we can give those financial incentives. So this would be the type of legislation that Neal should support. It's hugely important for his district. It's a priority for people in his district, and he has not signed on to that, and he has not produced a House bill. He has not cooperated with the Senate side on this issue. So that's just one example of how he kind of ignores some of the the issues that are very important to his constituents. He gets a huge amount of money from the financial services industry, also the pharmaceutical industry. He just voted against transparency in pharmaceutical pricing. You might think, oh, well, what does transparency matter? Well, it matters for our insurance rates, because if nobody can see how much the drugs cost, then we can't, it's easy to hide that and make the rates, the insurance rates go up. So it's a whole collusion between those industries, getting as much money as they can out of the individual and paying as little as they can for their needs. So, Richard Neal was the only member of the Mass delegation to vote against that. Why would you do that? Well, if you just have to look at his funding coming from the pharmaceutical industry. Now, he also gets some money from Boeing, which is very strange because Boeing doesn't have a presence in our district. But and he did vote for the Aviation Safety Act, but he didn't do anything to help push it along. Right now, Richard Neal is on the Cape. He's in Chatham on the Cape. So that's not in his district. And he's living a good life. He's a multimillionaire at the time. He didn't start out that way. How do you get to be a multimillionaire if you're in public service? I believe in term limits. I have already had a career. I'm almost 60 years old. This is something that I want to do out of community service. I want to produce a template or a model for how a congressional office can be run. Everything should be transparent. When I go into Neal's office and say, who did the representative meet with? Did he meet with Boeing? Oh, we can't tell you that. We can't tell you. Well, why not? I'm a taxpayer. I'm a constituent. Why can't you tell me what his schedule is? Why can't you tell me who he's meeting with? That should all be transparent. So I'd like to I've been to hundreds of congressional offices. I've met with hundreds of different staff members and congresspeople. So I have a pretty good idea of what works, what people do that is good, and what doesn't work. And so for our district, I'd like to make a model office so that after my time in office, which would not be beyond 6 years, because I would just impose my own term limits on myself, someone else, someone younger, someone principled could take over. And there would be a standard for behavior that person would have to meet. And right now the standard is so low you can't even see it. There's not a standard. So the corruption kind of rules the day. So I'd like to break that cycle.
Yeah, you mentioned something quite important that I could really speak because I'm speaking from Canada. We have universal health in Canada, and yet we spend in Canada a smaller percentage of our gross domestic product, our GMP, on health than the US, where there are 50 million people that probably don't have any insurance or ability to access insurance. And the prices of drugs here are incredibly cheaper than the US. There are lots of people coming from border states into Canada to get their insulin and diabetes and other medications. And this is very strange because Canada has 44 million or less, and it's a smaller market. And we all know as economists that economies of scale should reduce. A country that has 330 million should be able to produce and sell medications at a fraction of what would cost Canada, and yet it's not. And why? As exactly what you're saying. These people have colluded with the representative of the people and have really been negligent of the public interest and preferring the private interest of these members who enrich themselves by their collusion and peddling influence to corporate that do not serve the public interest.
Yeah, Canada is using their bargaining power appropriately with pharmaceutical companies, and they're using, the collective purchase to say, okay, can we get a cheaper price? So the US could definitely do that. And it's by hiding information and hiding prices and hiding what's going on that they get away with this. So that actually segues into what I could do as an independent in Congress. So I could do a lot of bargaining, not just for pharmaceutical prices, but on all kinds of issues important to my district. So we have a House, which is going to be close in Republican and Democrat. And me as an independent, as the first independent to get into the House of Representatives, I would have a lot of bargaining power between those two groups, because the one would wish me to vote with them and the other would wish me to vote with them. And I could say, well, no, I'm going to vote with you only if I get this for my district and only if I get that for my district. So I would be in an amazing, powerful position in terms of my district that has never been seen before. And the reason is just because of all these factors aligning, the Republicans and the Democrats being so close in number and me being one independent that they would be trying to woo. So that would give me that kind of bargaining power that we're talking about. Pharmaceuticals that Canada is using would give me that kind of bargaining power on many issues. So that's also very exciting.
No, and this is to the interest of the community, because you will be in a much better position to serve them and to safeguard their interests when in other circumstances, when people have to abide by party discipline and the funding relationship they have, they sacrifice the public interest. I mean, to a great extent, you would be in a very special position. And I hope
right. Yeah, and my son is lobbying to move money away from military support of Israel to American needs. He's in Washington, D.C. lobbying on that right now. His name is Adnan Stumo. Actually, my last name is not Stumo. My last name is Milleron, Milleron. And if you wanted to support me, you could go to nadiaforcongress.com. And that's my website. And then you could see everything.
Say say it again. This is very
Sure. Sure. My website is NadiaForCongress.com. NadiaForCongress.com.
oh,
That's, yeah, you can't give if you're a Canadian citizen or an international citizen. You can only give if you're a US citizen because we can't accept international contributions. That's part of our election law. But if you're an American citizen, then you can give. And I want you to know that my son Adnan Stumo is actively, he's got 38 representatives that are against continuing to fund Israel militarily, because they are not the most deserving nation, nor are they the most needy nation, but they get the most international funding from the United States of any other nation. And so he's working on this. So 38 out of 500 and something congressperson, you might think that that's not a lot of people, but that's where he's starting. He's committed to this. He's working with a guy who wrote a book called The General's Son. What is that guy's name? Miko, Miko Peled, Peled, Miko Peled.
He's the son of a Israeli general.
Yeah, yeah, and he's made an organization in Washington D.C. called, I think it's called the House of Freedom. And it's a pro-Palestinian organization, and Adnan is working with him to try to lobby the Congress and try to educate people one by one, because our son, he's a sailor, and he wanted to take a flotilla and go to Gaza and deliver aid directly. And we were afraid as a family. We've already lost 2 children out of 4 children. So we lost our daughter on the airplane. We lost a son to cancer. And then we have a son who is a ship's engineer. And then we have another son, Adnan, who is a sailor. And so we convinced him and we said, look, you could make much more difference if you just go to these offices, because 60 representatives from pro-Israel groups go into the Congress every year, and they go from office to office to office. They get 60 visits a year, each office, from these representatives of pro-Israel groups. We said, just go there and start educating people about what is the reality of this money expenditure. Where is it going? Who is it killing? What good is it doing, or not? No good at all, really, for the United States. It's really destabilizing our strength and the goodwill towards us in the Middle East. It's actually creating a threat. It's creating physical threat to Americans and to the United States. It's creating anger and misery and just it's creating hatred. So we convinced him, and he's very good at this, and so he is doing it. He's going from office to office, and we expect him over the next years to make a good deal of progress, moving that number for 38 up. And I would be just one more person. So I would be, 39, and then we could continue educating people. And I would help with that process. But of course, I would do it from the perspective of the need of my constituents.
Absolutely. Well, power to you and good luck. And to a great extent, you're not only a good voice for our community, you're a good voice for your community, the overall district, because Americans are honest people, and they are not fully aware of the consequences of some of their positions they're taking. By sending bombs, that are the heaviest bombs, that each one of them could kill hundreds at one shot. They are being basically implicated, and to a great extent there is rooms, and some people are thinking of trying to take lots of Americans to court for being complicit in this, when they have not in any shape or form aware of what their government is doing. To a great extent, power to you, power to this group, and we really feel that it's not only good for humanity, it's also good for Americans, because Americans are not really very knowledgeable of what's going on. And when Americans know what's going on, I am very much convinced that they would not be happy, especially as we mentioned, much of the money billions are going on monthly basis to people whose per capita income is higher than the Americans. I mean, Israel per capita income is 57,000 US, the American 75. Take the Palestinian out, which is 20%, and they get very little. Then the Israelis that are non-Palestinian, they are getting maybe $80,000 per person. How could you justify the rich literally, taking money from poorer countries to support richer people? And
yeah, and even more than that, they have subsidized housing and their healthcare is paid for. And those are issues that really affect people in our district. We don't have healthcare that covers everybody. And we have a problem with affordable housing. People can't get housing here. So to subsidize a country that has more benefits than we do, it just doesn't make any sense. It's something that we can't afford to do. So definitely, also, I'm standing up as just another immigrant family. Our country is made up of immigrant families. I'm super proud of my heritage. There's so many people that have achieved in my family and the people who have immigrated from Arab countries to the United States. So I'm standing proudly as another Arab American to show that people from Arab countries are productive and conscientious and service oriented, and a lot of the terrible sort of smears against Arabs in general. I just want to stand among many others to say this is not who we are, and it's to stand for, to show an example of who we are, just another example among many. So I think we are all complicit. I am complicit in the genocide in Gaza because it's my tax dollars that are going there. And if I don't stand up and say that I don't want to pay for this and I don't want my money to go for this, and it's just unconscionable and I'm not part of it. If I don't actively stand up and say that, then I am participating. So it's important also to be an example in that regard.
That's perfect. I could speak to you for hours, and you're very articulate, and you bringing in very important issues that have not really been discussed in terms of the unacceptable complicity of Americans when they're not aware by funding the genocide in Gaza, and the fact that a country like the United States with very limited service and benefits to its citizens are subsidizing a country that provides a huge amount of benefits to its people, depending on money that they get from the United States, which is absolutely ludicrous. Listen, I mean, we are very much here at Arabic Hour, hoping that you will be the voice for our community in Congress. And I'm sure it will be a great voice, because it's a voice for justice and for peace and for benefit of the main human beings that have been neglected, that don't have affordable housing, that don't have really the good jobs, they don't have the good income, not have the medical services. It is absolutely mind-boggling that there are some people in the richest country that cannot have access to medical services and have to wait months and have to pay huge amounts for their medication, life-saving medication, because of the monopolies and the connivance of the business and the politicians to literally deny these services to their constituents.
I'm a mom and I lost my daughter. So I really feel there's a huge issue in our district. Over 20% of the yearly deaths in our district are due to opioid abuse. Okay. So moms are losing their kids to fentanyl, and those kids are taking fentanyl and they don't know what they're taking. A lot of times the death occurs because the person doesn't know that this is what they're taking and their body has no tolerance to that. That fentanyl is coming into our homes through Federal Express and UPS. We have dogs, we have ability, we have all kinds of technology to be able to detect that drug coming into our country, and we can do it. There's a pathway to stop the fentanyl physically from coming into our homes. Over 20% of the deaths, that's an epidemic. That's a crazy amount of death. I mean, that's unacceptable. So I'm concerned about deaths in other countries, but I'm also concerned about death and suffering and grieving right here. And, you know, it's something that I can't believe that our congressman is totally ignoring this huge problem, all these grieving families and people dying on their drug dealer's couch. I mean, do you think the drug dealer wants to kill his clients? No, he doesn't. This is something that is totally out of control and that our government can do something about. So, you know, on all these issues, I am a compassionate person. I see the suffering, and I also see pathways to alleviate it.
Power to you, and we're crossing our fingers and hope that the next time we meet, you will be our representative in Congress.
Inshallah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Another program, excellent program from Arabic Hour, and look forward to seeing you again and hopefully very soon.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.